For instance, people say, one makes projections. It's nonsense. Who doesn't make them and finds them?
Yes.
That are already there, because the unconscious is here not conscious, but there is conscious.
Yeah.
In my brother.
Yeah.
I see the beam of my eye as a splinter in my brother's eye. And the projections are not made. You see, when I say self, then you mustn't think of I myself, because that is only your empirical self, and that is covered by the term ego. But when it is matter of the self, then it is matter of a personality that is more complete than the ego, because the ego is only consists of what you are conscious of.
If this life is but a dream, then ancient myths are the forgotten maps left by those who dared to awaken. To cross the threshold of illusion, we must now step into the alchemical fire of the soul.
We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And a myth is that field of reference, metaphors referring to what is absolutely transcendent. The first stage in the hero adventure, when he starts off on adventure, is leaving the realm of light, which he controls and knows about, and moving toward the threshold. And it's at the threshold that the monster of the abyss comes to meet him. And then there are 2 or 3 results. One, the hero is cut to pieces and descends into the abyss in fragments to be resurrected, or he may kill the dragon power, as Siegfried does when he kills the dragon, but then he tastes the dragon blood. That's say he has to assimilate that power. And when Siegfried has killed the dragon and tasted the blood, he hears the song of nature. He has transcended his humanity. It's a cycle. It's a going and a return that the hero cycle represents. But then this can be seen also in the simple initiation ritual, where a child has to give up his childhood and become an adult, has to die, you might say, to its infantile personality and psyche, and come back as a self-responsible adult. It's a fundamental experience that everyone has to undergo. Requires a death and resurrection, and that is the basic motif of the hero journey. Leaving one condition, finding the source of life to bring you forth in a richer or more mature or other condition.
These myths were not stories. They were survival codes, secret compasses for the soul's return. Every dragon faced, every abyss crossed was a step toward the forgotten gold within us.
I started drinking ayahuasca as a research project in order to be able to come from a place of genuine experience in writing a particular book. But I found the experiences so extraordinary and life-transforming that I continued with the work. I would call it work, and I guess I've had somewhere north of 70 journeys with ayahuasca. Many of them do not involve entities. Many of them involve deep self-reflection. In some cases, there are amazing fractals and geometry morphing constantly and changing shape. And then sometimes entities come through. Now, I know that mainstream materialist science would like to convince us that those entities are simply brain candy. They're just figments of they're epiphenomena of our brain activity, as indeed mainstream science defines our consciousness also, and that there's no reality to them. But my experience in a visionary state is that there is a reality to them, that there is some reality beyond this reality, and I find it hard to convince myself that these entities that I encountered, which have from time to time included things like elves and fairies, I find it hard to convince myself that they're not in some way real. But the question is, once we get into that deeply altered state, which is not the alert problem-solving state that our society values so highly, once we get into that deeply altered state and encounter entities, are they entirely figments of our imagination, or are they real in some sense? And if I look at the sort of evolutionary notion, I think everybody understands we have certain, I can only call them modules in the brain. We have a module for intuitive physics. The example I often give is that if somebody throws a book at me, I probably would be able to dodge that book or to bat it aside with my hand before it hit me. Actually, underlying that dodging or batting the book aside is a very complex series of calculations, which involve the object, the strength of the thrower, the trajectory of the throw. All of that is being done in an instant by the brain. The brain clearly has a shortcut to work all of this out. And I can understand that in evolutionary terms, because if you didn't have the ability to dodge objects being thrown at you, then you might be less likely to pass on your genes to future generations than somebody who did have that ability. But what I don't understand is why the brain would invest in seamlessly convincing parallel worlds filled with intelligent entities that seek to teach us. I don't see why that would evolve in human beings all around the world. It seems to me that there's something else going on here.
What if those visions were not madness, but memory? Ancient messages woven into the blood, into the stars, calling us back to the realms we once knew, but forgot.
Science itself is evolving, moving away from a mechanical understanding of nature. The idea of a kind of intelligence active throughout nature is gaining support within the scientific community, affirming the view long held by indigenous people and shamans. Now the entire edifice of life from top to bottom seems shot through with intelligence, suggesting that the evolutionary process itself may be intelligent, and that evolution may be guided by an intelligence within, as opposed to blind chance or an intelligence above. The molecular genetics of the 1990s had revealed the signals and receptors that plant cells use to communicate and learn. Plants assimilate information and they can respond on the whole plant level. And to do this, they use molecular and electrical signals, some of which are identical to those used by our own neurons. Plants don't have brains so much as act like them.
The DNA inside a plant is the same as the DNA inside your own neurons, the same not only at the level of the nature of the molecule, but actually in terms of long genetic sequences. Half the genes in the banana's genome have equivalents in the human genome. A gene is like a paragraph of instructions. DNA also functions as a kind of antenna, and it picks up biophotons. These are photons generated by biological organisms, and it emits them. And it would seem that the hallucinogenic molecule contained by ayahuasca works on receptors on the outsides of neurons in a way that influences how the DNA contained in the nucleus of those neurons is organized. It unfolds. And so the repetitive parts, known as junk, become a periodic crystal at that point. DNA is an aperiodic crystal, but in its regular repeats, it becomes periodic. And periodic crystals are used for transmission of electromagnetic waves. And photons are electromagnetic waves. And actually, the wavelengths of these biophotons correspond exactly to the wavelengths of visible light, and in particular to the colors that one sees in ayahuasca hallucinations.
What science once dismissed as myth, it now rediscovers that life itself hums with a hidden memory, a cosmic language, an alchemical song. etched into our very DNA, waiting for its return.
A paper published recently about canopy-dwelling monkeys who only leave the canopy for the acquisition of one particular food. And the food they will come to the ground for and risk predation is mushrooms. So it seems perfectly reasonable to suggest that our remote ancestors exploring the new environment of the grasslands would have encountered, as you would if you were to go to the tropics, psilocybin-containing mushrooms growing in the dung of cattle. Well, so let's look at psilocybin then in a little more detail. It has a number of properties not specifically related to its psychoactivity that make it an ideal candidate for a catalyst for the emergence of consciousness in an advanced animal. So right there, you have a three-step process driven by nothing more than hunger and curiosity that leads remote primate ancestors to a confrontation with what Rudolf Otto called the wholly other, the holy, the numinous, the transcendental. I believe that what makes the psychedelic experience so central is that it is a connection into a larger modality of organization on the planet, which is a fancy way of saying it connects you up to the mind of nature herself.
If visions birthed our awakening, then the ancients were never dreaming, they were remembering, and their path, the alchemical hero's journey, still lives inside us, calling us to finish what they began.
We'd like to comment a little bit upon this process of individuation, this process of how all these factors move toward a whole, a totality. Well, that's something quite simple. And take an acorn, yes, put it into the ground, it grows, and it becomes an oak. You see, that is man. Man develops from an egg and develops into the whole man. And that is the law that is in him. Well, under just one typical archetype for it is what they call in alchemy, the quadratura circuli, the square in the circle, or the circle, the square. And it is an age-old symbol that goes right back in the prehistory of man, and it's all over the world. And it either expresses the data or the soul. And it is from terms of psychologically very much related. Which doesn't mean that I believe that God is a soul, or that the soul is God. I make that statement that there is a psychological relation. And it expresses the fact that there is a center of the periphery. And it tries to embrace the whole. It's a symbol of wholeness. So you see, in a moment where when there is great disorder and chaos in the man's mind, then this symbol can appear as in the form of a mandala in a dream, or when you may imagine later attached to the drawings or something of the sort. There is spontaneously appears as a compensatory archetype, bringing order, showing the possibility of order, centeredness. And it is a center which is not coincident with the evil, but with the wholeness, and this wholeness, our wholeness, which I call the self. This term of wholeness. And I am not whole in my ego. My ego is a fragment of my personality. So you see, that the center of a mandala is not the ego, it is the whole personality. The center of the whole personality.